Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to be going over the Lutron Homeworks QS system and how that can be integrated in with our M1 controls. My name is Amy Strickland and I'm in our tech support and marketing departments here at Elk Products. Joining me today is Ryan Burnish. He is in residential applications engineering. He's actually the team leader there with Lutron Electronics. So we're happy to have Ryan with us here today.
Hello, everyone.
So let's go ahead and talk just a little bit about the M1 system. M1 is a security and automation control system. The M1 is built on a platform of security and life safety, so that's the basis of the system is a rock-solid security life safety system. Lots of different detection and reporting capabilities, and we do have reporting capabilities that span across, telephone lines, cellular, IP, all those different methods we have covered. The M1 has an advanced microprocessor that is more capable and provides more speed and is much more secure than what you would find in a traditional alarm panel. We have wireless products that are two-way, and they have multi-level security to prevent hacking and jamming and that sort of thing, so you have a more secure, reliable wireless solution with the M1. We also have the capability of providing event notifications to the end user through phone calls, emails, text messages to keep them informed, and remote control features through smartphones and tablets, web browsers that we have options with or without monthly fees. And more into the focus of what we're going to be going over today is our ability to provide intelligent control solutions for things like lights and thermostats and a variety of other things as well. And we have the flexible integration, like we're talking with the Lutron today. We're working on those products, and that's one of our partners that we work with. So being able to work with a variety of products, it really allows us to have that flexibility, and the smart features of the M1 really provide some interesting benefits and solutions for your customers. So again, as I was stating, we're working with Lutron today, and I want to point out that we do work with a variety of product lines from Lutron. We work with their Radio Raw 2 as well as Caseta. The Caseta is, you're looking for maybe a smaller scale, like a smaller home, or if you just want a room-to-room type solution. Radio Raw 2 is for, if you want to do a few rooms or, maybe a home up to 5,000 square feet. Both of those are wireless solutions, and the Homeworks QS is what we're going to be focusing on today. That is a wired and wireless, or could be a hybrid type solution, and it's for larger homes up to 30,000 square feet. So the Homeworks QS is what we'll be focusing on today. At this point, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Ryan.
Great. Thank you, Amy. What I'd like to start by doing is kind of introducing everyone to the Homeworks QS system. And the first product that we'll talk about would be the processor. Oops, sorry, went a little too fast there. Screen's a little slow on my end. Okay, so the Homeworks QS system, we'll talk about the processor first, because that's going to be the most important piece of the equation, because that is what the Elk system will be actually communicating with to perform the integration directly through the network. But the Homeworks system itself is a luxury lighting control system that provides convenient control of electric light, natural light, both helping basically with the interior, the exterior light coming into the house, to provide not only an energy efficient solution, but an elegant solution as well to drive scene control throughout the entire residence, whether it's local scene control or whole home scene control. And then through integration, whether that be through a more cloud-based platform, or in this case, more of a direct integration between the processor and some other system, we are then integrating with a lot of other components that create basically a total connected home experience, whether that's an AV system, an HVAC system, or in this case, a security system to provide a seamless experience for the end user. And so, as I said, it all starts with the Homeworks QS processor as the key component here, because this is what the Elk system will be directly talking to. And just a high-level overview of what the processor is. It has a connection to Ethernet. There's a built-in switch, so you have two connections to Ethernet, but they're essentially connected to each other. So this processor gets connected to a switch or router on the network. And on that network, the Elk system would live through its interface, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. And so all the communication with this processor is through Ethernet, including when you're programming the system, and all the programming for the system is performed on your Windows machine. At the bottom of the processor, there are what we call configurable links. There's two of them. And those configurable links can be a variety of different device types. So we have a wired communicating link. We call it a QS link. There's a QS wireless link, which uses our patented ClearConnect technology for wireless control. We have a panel link, which, if anyone out there is familiar with Homeworks, I'm sure you've seen that in the past as well. Those are the remote modules that are mounted in panels in an equipment room somewhere, so all of the lighting and switching control is remote, and the user interacts primarily then with wired keypads for a more centralized solution. And then the fourth link type, which is primarily a legacy support link type, is the old wired Maestro dimmer switch fan control link that we have as well. And so those two links can be configured as any one of those choices, and you have 2 links per processor. You can have a total of 16 processors on a single Homeworks QS installation, so a total of 32 configurable links, which equates out to approximately a 10,000 zone system maximum. And by zone, I mean lighting circuit, it could be a shade, could be a contact closure output. So we're talking pretty expansive systems, that can certainly control a house, if we needed to, well over 100,000 square feet. Most Homeworks installations typically run anywhere from 10 to 30, 40,000 square feet on average. The processor is powered by low voltage and can mount inside of a number of different enclosures, but it is enclosure mounted. So there's low voltage panels that we offer. We also offer space at the bottom of some of our dimming panels that you can mount a processor in as well. What we see now is the system architecture for the Homeworks QS system. This is actually available on Lutron.com. If you go to the service and support menu on Lutron.com, there is a technical reference guide section where you can find these system architecture diagrams. They do a really good job of framing up all of the different pieces and parts that can make up a Homeworks system. So let's take a closer look. The panel link, as I mentioned before, is for centralized dimming and switching control. There's a variety of different panels that we offer as part of this line. The most common ones you will see involve the use of remote power modules, which you see in the images at the bottom and also in the fully populated panel to the right. Those modules communicate back to the processor through an interface. In the case of the remote modules that you see pictured there, in the lower right corner, there's a module interface down below. That interface would connect physically back to the configurable link on the processor. We also do offer specification-grade panels, which involve the use of dimming cards, and those are typically seen in very, very large installations where you have a lot of wattage that you're trying to control with your lighting. But those panels can actually get up to 144 circuits of control out of a single panel. And those panels are rather large, and they can be pretty heavy. They can actually weigh up close to half a ton, believe it or not, in total mass. So panel link, again, for centralized control. And so this would consume one of the links in your processor if you go this route for dimming. And then what we typically see on those jobs then is the use of link 2 as a QS wired link on those processors, where you have centralized lighting control, and then you have wired keypads to create the scenes and control the scenes that are programmed through the software to drive those modules to execute different actions. So we have a wide variety of keypads. You can get a little bit of a feel for them here in the system architecture diagram, but I certainly encourage everyone to check out In the handout section, Amy included our Pleasance brochure, so you get a little bit of a more closer, intimate look at our keypad styles. Again, there's a lot of variety to it, especially once you're talking about Homeworks. Everything from the dynamic keypad, which is a touchscreen keypad, to slimline architectural styles like Signature Series, to the relatively new Palladium keypad that has dynamic backlight management. So basically, as the light inside the space changes, so does the backlight. All of these devices communicate back to the processor directly without an interface using 4-conductor wire, 1 pair of wire for power, 1 pair for communication, which is twisted and shielded. A lot of times we refer to it as the Lutron wire, but you can get the wire pretty much anywhere. So you're talking here, again, about more of a centralized system where the only interface in the space is a keypad controlling your lighting and switching loads back in the panel. We also do offer, and a lot of people don't realize this because we have a lot of other solutions, Amy was alluding to before, with like Caseta and Radio Route 2. Those are wireless solutions. A lot of people think that Homeworks QS is purely wired. Homeworks QS could be completely wireless as well if you wanted it to be, or you could have a hybrid system where you mix in wired and wireless. The wireless technology used with Homeworks QS is the same that's used with Caseta and Radio Route 2. We call it ClearConnect. ClearConnect here in North America utilizes 431 to 437 megahertz. So you have a very, very little chance of any sort of interference. So we have very clean communication. When you press a button, something's going to happen. And so when you look at these wireless link devices, they do look similar in many ways to what is on the wired link as far as keypads, right? We have the C-Touch aesthetic. We have Graphic T. You can even see the dynamic keypad. Touchscreen keypad also can be wireless as well. But there's some additional components like our Touch Pro thermostat, which does integrate with the Elk solution that we're going to talk about today, and a variety of other controls. Our shades can be wireless or wired. And all it really comes down to is whether or not you clip on an antenna or not. Okay? And so you have those 3 links. So again, either a hybrid or a fully wireless system. If you go fully wireless with Homeworks, you can get 1,500 devices. So where that compares to Caseta and Route 2, Caseta is 50 devices, Radio Route 2 is 200 devices maximum. And again, Homeworks, essentially 7.5 times the size of Radio Route 2 at its largest, just from a pure wireless perspective. The final link, as I said before, which we don't need to spend a lot of time here, again, this is mostly for legacy support if you're upgrading older Homeworks solutions to Homeworks QS. A lot of times you don't see these on new installations. It's H48, the H48 link. So it was basically, you can have up to 4 interfaces, each controlling up to 48 wired Maestro-style dimmer switches or fan controls communicating back to the Homeworks system. So it's a mix of almost, again, like it's kind of a hybrid system, but there is some centralization and some panelization involved as well. So it's a little bit more of a hybrid. And again, you would need some sort of keypad typically in the system to control these. Again, most of the time you're going to see this in the job is if you're taking an older system to a newer system. Okay, so we have, those are the 4 major link types in the system. There we go. Now, in terms of how we communicate to the Elk system, like I said, all the communication to the Homeworks QS processor is through Ethernet. And so what Elk did is they gathered together an M1 interface kit, in many ways very similar to what we've done with Route 2 in the past many years ago. So the model number, as you see there, Elk-M1XSLC, which if you've seen that model number before, it's been associated with Caseta, which Elk has been integrating with for over a year now. So that same interface kit could be utilized with Homeworks as well. As you see below, it does require a firmware update, which is captured in Elk's integration notes that you can utilize to get the setup up and running. And what this kit shows, you can kind of see in that diagram that there is an RS-232 serial port on the board itself. And so included with this kit is a serial to Ethernet bridge, which allows this interface to talk into the network and subsequently to the Homeworks QS processor so we can get that 2-way communication feedback. Everything you need is going to be included in this kit from Elk. And obviously, on the Elk side, you would still need to purchase your panel and your keypad. But this is going to be really, from an integration perspective, this is the real necessary component along with Homeworks QS processors. These 2 devices are what's going to do the talking to make the integration possible. take a closer look at the one-line diagram for this. Again, the key notes being that Elk interface will live off of a connection from the M1 panel. From there, you're going to go into that protocol converter between serial to Ethernet communication, which is going to tie into a router or switch port on the network. The Homeworks QS processor or processors will be also connected to their own router or switch ports to live on the same local network, and that's how you're going to get that communication. From an integration perspective, as far as Elk's concerned, it's not going to matter which processor IP address you choose once we get into those kind of more intricate setup details. They all have the full database on them. Every Homeworks processor contains the full database for the project. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. You will have access to everything you need throughout the entire house. Okay, so we proceed on here. From an integration capability perspective, Elk integration will get you up to control of 255 Homeworks QS devices or zones, including, right, that could be individual dimmers, individual shades, shade groups, touch pro thermostats, and when I say keypads, it's really not so much the keypad, it's the actual scene that's on that particular keypad that you're really pressing, right? So you can either get individual zone control, or you would be able to get scene control, which is certainly in a larger lighting control installation, scenes become even more critical to be controlling. That's where a lot of the magic's going to happen. And so we'll jump into the software here in a little bit. It's important to know, again, that Elk utilizes the first 255 integration IDs, which they will certainly tell you about, again, in their setup document, which is very well written. They'll remind you of that. So that's a key note, because in the Homework software, you may have to do some tweaking, so to speak, of the IDs to make sure that everything you need the Elk system to control is within integration IDs 1 to 255. And then, because what the Homework system will do is the Homework system will apply IDs to literally almost everything in the system, which includes area tree, right? So every room, every parent area gets an ID, right? And so a lot of that information is really not going to help you on the Elk side. So you can take like the IDs for your areas and things you're not controlling and move them outside of 255 so that you don't run into any issues there. And you make sure that, again, everything under 255 is what the Elk system is going to control. As far as touch pro thermostat IDs, they must be less than 100. They have to be a 2-digit number. So if you're ever controlling any Lutron touch pro thermostat as part of this Elk integration, make sure that they have a 2-digit integration ID, that they're less than 100. So not only do they have to be less than 255, but also less than 100. The other important note is that the Homeworks QS software, which we're about to jump into in a second, is available only to qualified accounts. So what does that mean? That means that, you know, throughout North America, we have manufacturers reps that represent our line, and we also then have territory sales leaders that work with them. And so when you get to Homeworks, when you start talking about Homeworks, you're talking about more of a, you know, much higher end system. The opportunity, you know, the percentage of the market is relatively small. So we like to make sure that we protect the dealer business and all that. So there's an application process where the local team will review the business and all that. And once you get the application approved by Lutron, you can come to the class. It's a 3-day qualification class in Coopersburg, Pennsylvania. Not exactly the most luxurious destination, perhaps, but it's certainly the lighting control capital of the world. So we get to the Coopersburg for 3 days. We'll teach you the ins and outs of the software and design and talk about the hardware. And so there's a lot more involved in this. So just understand that as we're talking about it. It's certainly not out there and available for everybody. There is a qualification process to that. So what benefits do you get with integration? Well, one of the key benefits, I think, is that, you know, yes, Lutron has very beautiful keypads, and they will certainly be installed all over the house. But also, if you think about how a lot of your end users use their house, the security keypad, if they have a security system running, is going to be one of the very first things they do when they walk into the house. They have to disarm their system. And so I think one of the key benefits is the ability to tie core security functionality to core scenes, right? Here at Lutron, you know, whether it's a Caseta system, RA2, or Homeworks, we find that end users want the same things out of their system at all times. And so, what Caseta users do in more of the, let's say even the DIY market, they're doing a lot of the same things. They're setting time clock schedules. They're using welcome scenes, away scenes, good night, good morning. It's a lot of the common things. We see the same things when you're talking about homeworks. And so it would be nice that if instead of having to go to 2 different keypads, you can go to the Elk keypad, and when you disarm your system, it could trigger essentially a welcome scene that exists on a Lutron button, or maybe doesn't exist on a physical button, maybe it's on a phantom button, and that one action from Elk could drive the entire house to react. And so what could happen? Not only is your security system disarmed, you get your nice, convenient, safe path of light to, through, and around your home. Your shades can move as part of that scene, and it can all be based upon time of day through conditional logic. And then, if you really wanted to, you could even have things like maybe some Sonos speakers turn on, right, during the same scene. So it's all from one press on the Elk side, driving a Lutron scene that has all the other programming in it, seamless integration. The same thing goes for good night, perhaps, with an arm stay. You're staying home, but you're going to arm your system, you're going to sleep, triggers a good night scene. So it's the ability to blend in all those scenes conveniently with a single press, really. Not a single press, I'm sure there's a little bit of a code you're typing in, but you get the idea. You're going to one interface, and in a simple process, you're driving all these things throughout your house to work. And then there's the individual zone control that you get as well. So I could go to my Elk keypad, and if I wanted to change the light level on one dimmer in my living room, I can do that. If I want to change the set points on a thermostat, I can do that. All right, so it's the individual control, it's elevated beyond what you get with normal security integration. Right? Basic security integration, you get a contact closure, you get panic. Someone breaks in your house, the lights outside go flash, the lights inside go full, the shades open, devices lock out. But this is not just the security. Now you're talking about the comfort, convenience, the ambiance, the daily things that the end user is going to experience. Right? And so that can all be impacted through this integration with Elk. And so when you start talking about the software, which we're going to get into here in a second, right, you basically have 4 key steps involved in the software. And the software proceeds logically left to right. So you start on the left with design. Design is where you create your area tree. It's where you create your load schedule for the lighting system, for the shades. It's where you figure out which devices are going to go where. And that includes local equipment like keypads and local dimmers in the wall, as well as panelized equipment, backroom equipment, processors. Go to the Program tab, and on Program, that's where you build your macros, essentially. That's what they can kind of be looked at. We call them scenes at Lutron, but basically that's what you're building. Time clock events, the programming in Homeworks, especially if you're familiar with Radio Route 2, programming Homeworks is even more advanced. It allows for things like conditional logic, variable logic. So you set up all your programming. You activate your devices. That way, the two-dimensional world that you created in your software in the activation step gets physically correlated to the three-dimensional world of reality, so that now you have associated which dimmer is really the one that's in the master bedroom, which dimmer is really the one that's in the kitchen. So that's what the activation step is going to help our system do. And once we know that information, you can go to transfer your database, get your lighting system up and running. And at that point in time, once you get the Lutron system up and running, as you've gone through that process, we'll find you have already created, in many ways, the foundation for what you need to do for integration with Elk. You just may have to go in and tweak some things. And so what we can do is we can now step into the software. And I will show my screen. Thank you, Amy. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? Amy, can you see that?
I do see it, yes.
Perfect. Okay. So what we have here is a sample database that actually has a bunch of programming in it already set up. All of our devices are already placed in the design. We have our area tree. As I said, if it comes to the point where you're going to become Homeworks qualified, you will certainly learn how to do all these things. We don't want to spend the webinar time doing that. But it's a very intricate software in that you have front room controls, and you got to build your load schedule, right? So you're setting up all this information ahead of time, right? And you get the lighting system up and running. And as you place these devices into the various areas of the area tree, in the background, we're already automatically assigning integration IDs to these devices. And so, like we said before, integration IDs 1 through 255 are the ones that Elk is going to be able to point to for control of the system, whether that's an individual zone or if it's a keypad that they want to press some scene buttons on. And so, if we need to tweak any of those integration IDs, we can do that by going up in the software to the Tools menu and going to Configure Integration. And so within Configure Integration, we can see that we have 3 different tabs: Integration, Ethernet Device Commands, and Telnet Logins. The only one that we are concerned about as far as Elk integration goes is really going to be this Integration tab. And so then you can see it says Assign Integration IDs to, and it says Devices. Devices are typically going to be considered things like keypads, could be a local dimmer. If you drop down the drop-down menu, you'll see shade groups, areas, and then zones. A little bit further down, you'll see HVAC. So most of what you're going to be concerned with as far as the Elk integration is going to be really contained within devices when you're trying to change the ID assignment for a keypad. Zones, which will be like your lighting zones. HVAC for your TouchPro thermostats, and then also your shade groups as well. And so in the text field to the right, you'll see that there's a little text box here that you can click into and type over. And so if you ever need to change the integration IDs of a particular device or area, you can do that. For example, if I go to areas, we talked about the need of getting the integration IDs of the areas maybe above 255 because as far as Elk is going to be concerned, it's going to be pretty much useless information. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to change the BAS ID to something higher than 255 to avoid any issues with the integration, I can change it to 300 just like by clicking in the box, typing the new number in. The software will warn you if there is a duplicate ID already. And so it's not going to allow you to duplicate the ID. You're going to have to find whichever device has a duplicate ID and change it first, or you have to pick a different number. But if you're not really using it for integration anyway, you can make it be 1,000 and it's not going to matter, right? So just pick something unique that is outside of the 255. And so that's what you would do. Either yourself, or if you're not a Homeworks dealer currently, you can work with a Homeworks programmer to make sure that these up to 255 devices have the proper IDs. Make sure that they go in here, and this is what they'd be doing. They'd be changing the IDs on the Integration tab of the Configure Integration window. So it's a very simple process. Anytime you change the ID here, it will require a transfer to the Homeworks QS system, to the processor, in order for the changes to take place. So it's not going to be as simple as coming in here, changing the number, closing the window. The changes won't have taken place again until the actual programmer goes to the Transfer tab and transfers their project. There is an integration report that is also available that could be printed out for you. So whoever's doing the programming, if it's not you, you could ask them to supply you with an integration report that gives you the IDs, and any edits that you'd like to see made, you could just note that down on the paper, hand it back to them, and they could go into the Tools menu and perform those changes. That report is found under the Reports menu, Integration. And so we have a report center. There's a lot of different reports that the Homeworks QS software has in it for everything from installation to programming. You can see a little bit of what that report's going to look like here. You can see the model number, the ID of that particular device, and then the component information that the actual third-party system is going to be pressing, if they're pressing a button or if they're turning on an LED. And this report, it can be relatively large. You see from the scroll wheel here, we keep scrolling down. all of our different devices, our keypads, our dimmers, our individual zones. Scroll back up a little bit. You can see how the ceiling fan, the sequences have an ID, the variables have an ID. Everything gets an ID, and it's all going to be shown in this report. So again, if you're not the programmer for the homework system, this is something you can request from them. They can easily generate it, save it to a PDF, or print it for you, and you can mark it up with whatever IDs you need. As far as programming goes, from a security perspective, the good part about, again, the Elk integration is that they have a full two-way driver, so they can really kind of go in there and they can say, if I want to control an individual zone or a scene, I can do that. I'm not just stuck controlling the security mode of the homework system. So any programming that you do in program devices, for example, on a keypad, see if we can find an example keypad here. If I wanted to control the prepare scene on this particular keypad in the kitchen, this is a graphic T hybrid keypad. This keypad has an ID, and then there's a component number for that prepare button, which will be found in the integration report. You could have the Elk system press that button if you would like. Okay? So it's all of this programming that the lighting control programmer is doing normally will be accessible as long as that integration ID is below 255. So again, it's a lot more than just security mode. It's all of the scene programming. We also have things called phantom keypads, which are keypads that do not exist in a tangible form in reality, but exist as like a virtual that can be pressed purely by a third-party system like Elk. So that programming, again, is accessible for the Elk system, as well as, like I was saying, the security mode. We do have a built-in security mode in the homework system. The security mode is basically the panic mode. This is the type of thing that's going to occur when someone breaks into your house, typically, right? So when you enter the mode, outside lights flash, inside lights full on, shades open, devices get locked out. All of that is custom configured by the programmer. So if there's certain devices that the end user doesn't want to be affected by the security mode, they could leave them unaffected. If they don't want certain keypads to be locked in their bedrooms or something, they could keep those unlocked and only lock certain ones throughout the house. When you exit the mode, we have the ability to restore dimmers to their previous levels before the security mode was entered, or you could create a scene specifically for the exit of security mode. Maybe the lights are a little brighter because the police are sticking around to file their reports and all that. So it's all custom configurable, but there is a security mode here specifically for panic, which of course can certainly be assigned into the Elk system and have the Elk system trigger this security mode. This security mode that you see here can be programmed to any button in the homework system. So if I wanted to, I could actually assign this to a phantom keypad, which couldn't be pressed by anything else other than the Elk system. So when there is a panic fault, the Elk system could press that button on the phantom keypad to drive this security mode. And that button could be set up as a toggle so that it enters and exits off the same button press. So that's the programming side of it. The other important thing that you're going to have to know when you're doing this integration would be the IP address of the processor that the Elk system, the Elk interface, will be talking to. You can find that information as well in the Homeworks QS software, and it's configurable too, right from here. If you go to the Activate screen, this is where, if we were connected to a system, we would see the processors populate here on the left. We shouldn't see any because I'm not currently connected to a system. But on the right-hand side, we see the settings. Currently, DHCP is enabled, but I can uncheck that, and I can set static IP addresses for these processors. And this information, again, will be captured in the Homeworks software. So this is where you could come if you needed that information, or you could ask the Homeworks QS programmer to send this to you. Right? You can see .201, .202. So as long as the IP address and subnet mask matches what the network needs, whatever the router expects as the format, make sure it matches here. And here's where the processor information is. So now that you have that, and you know how to change the IDs, and you know where to get the report, and you also know that the programming that is naturally done as part of building a homework system is accessible to the Elk system. It's actually a relatively easy integration. And again, just requires a little bit of setup perhaps with the IDs, making sure that the ones you want to control are less than 255. So I think with that, turn it back over to Amy here.
Thank you, Ryan. So now we're going to dive a little bit more into the M1 side of things, talking about the hardware configuration and the setup that you'll need to do on the various components of our kit that allows us to integrate with Homeworks QS. So let's just dive right into the IP232 configuration. Now again, just as a reminder, the IP232 is the serial to Ethernet bridge component of our kit. And so we do have to do some configuration here to allow this to properly communicate with the QS processor. So first thing to note is that the firmware version of the IP232 must be 1.0.18 or higher. If you're purchasing a new kit from your distributor, this is not something that you'll have to worry about. It will already be at this version or a newer version. This would only be a concern if you're trying to, piece together from parts that maybe you already have, and you have an IP232 and you have an M1 MIXSLU and you're wanting to kind of pull this together with components you already have, then you would want to check this and make sure that you've got the current version of firmware for the IP232. There are some serial port settings for that unit, and for the Homeworks QS we do need to have the baud rate set to 9600 and handshaking set to none. And there's also a place where you would need to name this device, and you can name it whatever you like. We're suggesting, IP232 for Lutron or something along those lines. We recommend that you leave the IP232 set to the Use DHCP setting. Since it's only going to be making outbound connections to the Homeworks processor, there's really not really any need for it to have a static IP address. You do not have to show the Homeworks QS where the IP232 is. It's the other way around. So you don't need to set a static IP address in the IP232 with this configuration, and you also don't need to worry about TCP or UDP connections or packet data for incoming. You do need to make an outgoing connection rule, and again, this is how the IP232 is going to establish a connection with the QS processor. So on the IP232 configuration software, you want to click the Add New button in the Outgoing Connection section. This will bring up an outgoing connection wizard that's going to step you through the process of creating this outgoing connection rule. The first piece of information that it's going to ask you for is the IP address of the Homeworks QS processor, and as Ryan just told us a few moments ago, that is something that you can get pretty easily from the designer software or from your Homeworks QS integrator. The port number would need to be entered as 23, and you do need to select TCP for the protocol. The second screen of the wizard is going to ask you how the connection should be made, or when the connection should be made, rather. You want to make that connection following power up or reboot, and it needs to stay connected indefinitely. And the final question in that wizard is going to be related to the remote system requiring a login, and then in this case you need to say yes. So once you make those selections, click Next, then you're going to be returned to the main screen and you'll see your outgoing connection. You can see it on this screenshot here highlighted in purple, and you can see that just basically explains how the connection is going to be made, you know, what the settings are and that sort of thing. Now we did specify that username and password will be required, and so you do need to enter the login prompt and reply for this outgoing connection, and so you can see that on the screen. Needs to be entered exactly as you see it there, with the login followed by the colon, password followed by the colon, and then your username Lutron and your password integration. Once you have made all of those configurations, then you can actually send that information to the IP232 and also save it to file on your computer for later reference. The next component that you'll need to configure is the M1XSLU. That is a device that connects to the M1 data bus, so you're going to follow the standard data bus wiring and termination rules as far as how that's going to be connected to the data bus and whether or not it gets data bus termination. Again, it's going to depend on your installation and how many other devices that you have, but just as a reminder, those basic rules are no more than 2 runs coming directly off the data bus. We have data bus hubs to accommodate multiple runs going into the panel, and the M1 is looking for 2 termination points. So again, you need to terminate the devices at the end of each run, and termination is handled differently with the 2 different hubs that we have. We have a lot of information online. If you need some help with the data bus, we have a video specific to that, so definitely check that out. But once you have this device on the data bus and you have it enrolled, there are dip switch settings to set the address. So you can see in this screenshot our M1XSLU is address 1. And so once you've got that enrolled on the data bus, you're going to need to proceed to update the firmware. As we stated early on, you do have to have the version 80.0.6, which is specifically for the M1XSLU, in order to work with the Homeworks QS. So that update is done through the Elk RP programming software. Once you're connected, you will find the Enroll Update option in the Send Receive menu. And we do have detailed instructions on doing that update in our integration instructions for this product, as well as in our release notes and on our website. So once you've got the M1XSLU configured, you've got your IP232 configured, now it's time to actually start inputting some of the data into the Elk RP software for the integration. And this is where that integration report is going to be really key in helping you get everything mapped over correctly. So let's first take a look at lighting data. This would also apply to shades. They would be entered here. Those can also be controlled through scenes, and that's typically how we recommend doing that. But if you did want to have individual control of shades, you would be doing something very similar here on the lighting data screen for that. So you can see in the report, it gives us the area and the description of the device, as well as its model and ID and some other information. What we're really interested in here is that ID number, and that's going to be a direct map from the Lutron system to the Elk system. So if it's ID 7 in Lutron, then it has to be mapped to device number 7 in the Elk software. And so that's where it gets really key that you plan the system out, especially if it's going to be a very large system. As Ryan stated earlier, you can link numerous processors together and have just a really, really large system. The Elk is going to be limited as to what parts of that system it can control by our limit of 255 device IDs for lighting. So you're going to want to map that out and make sure that you have the correct things that you're wanting to control in those numbers, and then map that over here. Now you'll notice that we do not have anything for thermostats on this screen. That's going to be handled elsewhere. But just again, keeping in mind that you're mapping over number to number, you've got a place for a name. You would need to enter serial expander for the format for any controllable device. And then you have a place where you can put in the type. For a lot of your devices, it's going to be a dimmer, although we do also have on-off and other device types that you can select there, and you just want to choose what is appropriate for the device that you're programming. With the Lutron Homeworks QS, we do not want the opt box checked. So you want to be sure to leave that unchecked. That does not apply to this particular integration. And then you want to check the show box for any device that should actually appear on your user interfaces. And we're talking about keypads as well as you know, your smartphone apps and that sort of thing. So anything you want to actually show up there, you want to click the show box. Okay, so now looking at the integration report and thermostats, again, that's handled a bit differently. The integration report will show you the ID number, and that's very important that you need to make note of exactly what that ID number is. And that's going to actually map to our thermostats. We have 1 through 16 is the number of thermostats the M1 can control, and the lowest ID number will be mapped to thermostat 1. And then going up from there. So in this example, your ID 19 is actually going to map to thermostat ID number 1 in the Elk. 30 being the next ID will map to 2. So you do not have that direct relationship with your ID numbers when it comes to the thermostats. Once you've established what those ID numbers are and you've mapped them on your thermostat screen, then you need to go into the text section in the Elk RP software and set up a couple of text strings to allow the thermostat integration to occur. The first string that you need to set up is the one for the discovery mode ending. That's what the DE stands for there. So we need to set up that string just as you see it there. And you can see here on this example we're going through port 4. That would apply to an M1XSLU set to address 4. So you know, if you have, like we were seeing on the screen before, if it was address 1, then we would want to say that that goes through port 1. So you're matching the port number there in your rule to the address of the M1XSLU. So you set up these text strings, and you can see on the actual thermostat text string we need to incorporate those integration ID numbers into that text string. So you've got your thermostat string and then your 2-digit number for your thermostat ID, your integration ID. And so that's again why Ryan was pointing out earlier that it couldn't be above 100 because it has to be a 2-digit number. Now if it happens to be a single-digit integration ID, then you're going to need to put a leading 0 to make it a 2-digit number there. Comma in between, no spaces, and then of course each of these strings is ended in a carriage return. Once you've set up the text strings, then you're going to create the rules that you see at the bottom in the rule screen, and we're basically saying when this text is received, and it's going to be received from the processor, basically telling us that it's done with our discovery mode, then we want to turn on a phantom output. And what we're doing there is basically just giving ourselves a timer, a buffer of 3 seconds after that discovery mode ends to then send the thermostat string, and that basically tells the M1 system what integration IDs are associated with those thermostats. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the rules portion a little bit. And there's a lot that you can do here, and you know, I definitely agree with Ron on the scenes, and that's where the real power is, because you're going to be able to make multiple things happen just from one event or one button press. But you know, just to show you a basic rule of controlling an individual device, we're saying here's, you know, maybe a motion detector, and the thing with integrating a security system with the lighting system is that you're able to make use of your intrusion sensors for automation. And so here's a case where we're using a motion detector that is part of the security system, but while the system is disarmed, we're using that as more of an occupancy sensor to allow us to turn on a light. So again, the real power is in the scenes, and again, that's because it just allows you to do different things on different devices. We're not just talking about lighting control there, but also the shade control and the thermostats, and that can all happen from one event. So we're doing that through using dim level commands with a fade rate of 7. That allows us to actually press a button, so to speak, on a keypad, whether it be an actual keypad or you know, a tabletop, or if it could be a phantom keypad, and we'll go into that just a little bit more as well. But so you can see from our welcome home task that we are actually pressing button 6 on the hallway keypad, and so that's going to activate a scene which could control multiple lights, adjust the thermostat levels, move the shades, you know, other things that the Lutron system is capable of controlling, like the audio, as Ryan was mentioning earlier. You know, all of those things can happen, and so then the system, the M1 system, can activate that welcome home task when you disarm, and that would be done through a rule as well. We can control the shades directly through their integration ID, but we do recommend using a button or a phantom activation for shades, because typically you're going to want multiple things to be happening there, and we feel like that's the best way to handle it. So again, using a task here, a watch TV task is going to press button 3 on the dim keypad, and that's going to, you know, dim the lights and close the shades and everything, get you ready for TV time. And again, noting that we're using the dim level with a fade rate of 7 to achieve those button presses. Okay, let's talk about the phantom keypads a little bit more in depth. That's a really neat feature that the Lutron QS system has, the ability to have a keypad that is not a physical keypad, that doesn't actually, you know, physically exist, but that allows us to have just a broad number of phantom buttons that we can press, therefore scenes that we can activate. So for each phantom keypad that you add into the system, it seemed to me, I didn't really find the limit to the number of buttons that could be added to it. Maybe Ryan could chime in and tell us if that's the case, but in either rate, we can control 1 through 99, again, because we're using those dim levels to determine which button press is going to be activated at your fade rate of 7. So you can see in this rule here we have a save energy rule, and we are activating button 2 on our phantom keypad, and we're also making some adjustments to the thermostats. Now, the thermostat adjustments could be part of that button, and you wouldn't need to put them in the M1 rule, but you may have, you know, some things going on with this particular button that you don't necessarily always want these thermostat settings to go with it, and so this is just an example of how we can activate a scene but also control individual devices, in this case the thermostat. And just out of curiosity, Ron, is there a limit to the number of buttons that can be added to a phantom keypad?
No, in Homeworks you can have more phantom buttons technically,
Yeah,
than you could with, like, the 99 is limited. It's kind of like the raw 2 limit. I mean, you have 100 phantom buttons, but in Homeworks you can add phantom keypads like you do a regular keypad. So in other words, if you needed, you know, even more than 99 buttons, you could have you just have to add enough phantom keypads to get you that many buttons.
right. So if you wanted, say, the, you know, full 255 you know, device IDs that the Elk can support, if you wanted that to all be scenes that are just part of phantom buttons, then you would have to set up multiple phantom keypads, each having 99 buttons on it. Even though the phantom keypad itself could have more than 99 buttons, the Elk won't be able to get to them. So that is exactly how you would handle that, by adding another phantom keypad.
Right.
Another neat feature that you have with the integration here is the ability to trigger an M1 rule from a button press. So let's say you're actually, you know, walking up to that dim keypad and pressing button 5 on that keypad, and you would like for that to do something in the Elk system that it's controlling that's not part of the Homework system. In this example, let's say it's a garage door opener, and the M1 system is controlling that through a relay. We can write a rule to say whenever that button button is pressed, button 5 on that keypad's pressed, and we want to activate our garage door opener for 2 seconds to open or close that door. And so again, that's done through the device ID and the level, the dim level that it's set to, and that dim level is going to equal the button that's pressed. And so you can do quite a bit with that if you get creative and you've got a lot of other, maybe again relay controlled things in the M1, water shutoff valves, sprinklers, that sort of thing that you maybe want to have controllable from the Lutron keypad. Then you're going to be able to do that with this M1 integration. Okay, at this time we're going to go ahead and address some questions that have come in. We've got one question here, and this is related to thermostat control. Does it also control Lutron's HVAC controller or only the Touch Pro thermostat? Now, what I'm familiar with is the thermostat itself, and I'm not familiar with the controller, so Ryan, maybe you could help me out with that one.
Well, yeah, I can. The Touch Pro thermostat and the HVAC controller utilize the same integration commands, the # tilde HVAC command. So, if that's what Elk is using, which I'd imagine they are, on the driver that you have on your side, they should be interchangeable solutions.
Okay, so it sounds like that may be possible, and what I will do is just verify with our engineers that we're using the command that Ryan stated, and if that's the case, then it should work. But I'll follow up with you on that question. Is it possible to integrate the Elk M1 system with the Radio Raw 2? Yes, it absolutely is. You're going to use the M1 MIXSLU with standard firmware for the Radio Raw 2 integration, and we have done a webinar on that integration in the past, and we do have that available on our YouTube channel, so I would invite you to go take a look at that. If you have other questions, definitely get those into us. At the moment, that's the questions that I have. Ryan, is there anything that, after having gone through that you feel like we maybe need to hit on again or reiterate other information that you feel like we might need to cover?
No, I think we covered it. I think we covered it all. So, if anyone is interested in, pursuing any sort of Lutron solution from a Lutron qualification perspective, just remember for Homeworks that there's, again, the application process that's involved with that. Radio Raw 2 and Caseta, though, are a little bit easier. So if you haven't done lighting control before, but you want to get your feet wet, so to speak, Caseta is a great place to start. There's online training for that. There's also some live trainings you can communicate with your local Lutron rep about, too, that they do periodically. Radio Raw 2, the level 1 qualification is online on our lutron.com/LCI online website. So all you have to do is create an account and take the online learning plan 620. You can get qualified in that. And so, again, if you haven't done lighting control before, that's a great place to start to see if it's something you want to involve in your business. And then, certainly any solution you pick can integrate with Elk through one of the interfaces. So, there's always a path to take.
Okay, I did have another question come in here about the M1 system, and so the question is, will it work with all the M1 Gold systems, or do you require an update to the M1? This integration works with both the M1 Gold system as well as our M1 Easy 8 system. Again, the interface is a data bus-based device that works with either system. The M1 system itself, there's not a direct requirement for it to be updated, but I would recommend updating the M1 firmware to the most current version that works with whatever other hardware you have, and things that you would need to look at in that case would be the type of wireless you have, if you have wireless on that system, whether or not you're working with a C1M1, that sort of thing, which is going to dictate that you update the system outside of what the Lutron requires. So not a direct relationship with the firmware of the M1 and the Lutron integration, but again, I would recommend that you be at the most current version that will work with your other hardware. Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions at this time, and again, if you have a question, please feel free to send it to us. I did want to point out that we do have a couple of handouts that you can download, and that's going to be a very nice brochure that covers the Lutron solutions that we've talked about today, not just Homeworks, but also the Radio RA2 and the Caseta. So I encourage you to download that handout. I also provided a cut sheet on the M1 Gold that just provides a good overview of its features. We do have a lot of information available. I know we have a lot of people that were new to M1 or had only installed a few systems. Definitely take a look at our website. Our forum online has a great deal of information. Our YouTube channel is probably one of the greatest resources that you can access, because every webinar that we do like this one today, we do record those and put those online, as well as some other much shorter quick how-to videos and that sort of thing. So definitely take a look at that. Connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the new stuff that we're doing. And I know Lutron is on social media as well, so you definitely want to connect with both companies so that you can stay up to date with everything. Did want to point out again that we will be at ISC West. That's April 5th through 7th in Las Vegas, and our booth number is 7033. And Ryan, did you get information on Lutron's presence at that show?
So we will have a room that we're going to set up for some demos and meetings. It's a smaller room, but the marketing department does not yet have a room number assigned to them. So what they suggested doing is, if anyone was interested in having a meeting with Lutron, they can send an email to Liza Ruff. Her email is lruff@lutron.com. and she can help facilitate any sort of meeting that you'd like to schedule to learn more about Lutron opportunities and security integration like the one we saw today with Elk.
Okay, great. And we can provide that email address in our follow-up email on Monday. If you didn't happen to catch that, we'll give you that email address in that follow-up email. So you should expect to see that sometime on Monday, and again there'll be a recording as well as the slide deck that we went through today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We have our phone numbers, websites on the screen for you now. I can be reached at training@elkproducts.com if you have questions after the webinar about this or anything else Elk or M1 related. Please send me an email. I'll be happy to help you out, and hope everyone has a great Friday, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.